Hello, everybody. How is everyone doing? Happy Thursday. We're going to take a few minutes to catch up with chat because you guys have been talking, and I am so glad to see you here tonight for Michelle Schusterman's live stream author interview. So excited. Can't wait. Hello, Margaret Pinard and Bex. Author JC Carpenter and Nicole Wilbur were first ones to be here. Also, bear with me if I'm getting some fuzziness. We're having an ice storm in the Midwest, which RC talks about below right here. Another snowstorm in the stupid Midwest. So the gremlins are eating the wires with ice right now. So bear with me. Dan Hook, good to see you, Dan. I'll be lurking and listening while at the gym. I can't wait for it. I can already feel the excitement from here. Well, that's good. You're all the way in the UK, so I love to hear that. Yes, okay, can't wait to watch. May end up watching later, depending on how busy things are. So I can say hi to the hosts and everyone. Good to see you, Kanashi. Good to see you. Margaret Pinard is saying hello to Dan. Richard is here. Good to see you, Richard Holiday. The man, the myth, the legend, Colin Clark. Good to see you. Novel Nana's here. And let me get StreamYard to catch up. Written in Melanin. Good to see you, Chelsea. It's been a while. I'm going to get back into my emails tomorrow, I promise. I've really been leaning into the break, guys. Cool Gamer. Good to see you. All right, guys. Oh, Regina Duke. That's what I was looking for. Hi, Regina. How are you? Okay. Lots of folks here, and I don't want to delay. I wanted to give it about a minute or so, which we are into, to let folks with notifications trickle in. Hello, Adrian. Good to see you. Before we talk about my big guest, Michelle Schusterman, which I'm so excited about. Good to see you, Maggie. Welcome, welcome. Anybody that's coming in late, I'm just going to be doing a little intro, so get settled, don't be too loud, and be friendly to everybody. Hello, Anita. Good to see you. We're getting rain and a storm tonight, break from the snow. Good for you. We're getting the snow that you're missing. All right, guys. With that, I'm going to get started. So, dreams do come true. Michelle Schusterman graciously agreed to a live stream author interview that would focus on her career, what inspires her, her freelancing work, and her wildly successful AuthorTube channel. I've been a Michelle Schusterman fan for about 5 years. My dear friend and St. Louis Public School librarian / comp titles ninja loved Olive and the Backstage Ghost. I did too. But it was Spell and Spindle that converted me from fan to super fanboy nerd. For those that aren't familiar with her work, welcome. Welcome out from under the rock. Michelle is the author of over a dozen critically acclaimed novels for middle grade and young adult readers. Her books have received starred reviews from Kirkus Book List and Publishers Weekly, and have received honors including multiple Junior Library Guild selections, the CBCC Best of 2019 list, ALA's Rainbow List, and Quick Picks for Reluctant Readers, and the North Carolina State College of Education Comic Relief Reading List. Since 2014, Michelle has taught over 1,000 students and led hundreds of creative writing workshops with Writopia Lab, Writing Workshops Dallas, and Lawson Writers Academy. So that is why we're all so excited to get to learn from Michelle through her YouTube channel or Skillshare classes. And yes, I've taken them all. They're linked in the description box below. All of the details for how to connect with Michelle, order her books, and links for her Skillshare courses can be found in the description box below. But without delay, let me welcome our guest of the moment, Michelle Schusterman. How are you doing?
Hi, I am wonderful. How are you?
Oh, good. I always worry I'm going to fluster that intro, but we did it. I did it without all the things. We had a few more trickle in, so I'm going to do a few belated hellos and how are yous. But did I miss anything in that intro that we need to touch on?
Well, you were thorough. I mean, you didn't introduce Rosa. She's going to make some appearances in the back, so we will meet her in a little bit. But yes, that was a wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. You have been surviving the busiest. I'm a vlog fan, one of your vlog fans, and you are coming out of like the crazy busy time. I can't even believe it. So, how are you holding up?
I'm getting through it. Like, you know, we'll talk about this a little bit more later. Because I went through the questions you're going to ask me, and I know it's going to come up, but I really do love my job. So you know what? Even when I'm drowning at work, at least it's work that I really love. You know? Yeah, there she is.
Yeah. I mean, if that's the worst thing you can say about your job, it's like, you know, you fell into the right thing. What can I say?
Absolutely.
Well, good. Well, let's get started with, again, I've lightly stalked you on YouTube for years. But one of the things you said that I found absolutely fascinating was that you lived abroad. And so I'm kind of curious now. I know where, because I've, again, stalked all the vlogs. For those that haven't, where did you live abroad? And while you were there, what did you take away from your time living there?
So in I I grew up in New Orleans, but I moved to Texas when I was like sixth grade. And so yeah, I went to college in Texas. I was a teacher in Texas. And the short version of the story is when I was in college, my dad, his job relocated him and my mom and my sister to Paris. And they went off to live in Paris for 3 years without me. And I wasn't bitter at all. I went to visit them there, and not to sound like a super basic American, but it was like mind blowing. I had traveled before, but not extensively, and just like the food, the way they live, the way it was like eye opening to me in a lot of ways. And one of those ways was it planted the seed in me that just because I grew up in a place didn't mean I needed to stay in that place. And a couple of years later, when Josh and I got married, our honeymoon, we instead of going on a normal person's honeymoon, we joined this like group of percussionists who had arranged a tour of Brazil. And we went and did like all of these percussion drum music workshops. And we spent 9 days in Salvador. We also went to Rio and Sao Paulo, but Salvador was like the main part of the trip. And we came back from that. This was 2005. And we couldn't let go of Salvador. So in 2007, we sold our house and quit our jobs and moved to Salvador with like nothing, with no plan. We just had like the 3-month visa, and we were like, well, let's hope we can figure this out. And we taught ESL, and we stayed there for a year, and it was incredible. I mean, I definitely, gosh, I mean, this was back in 2007, so it feels like ages ago.
Yeah.
But it definitely taught me to slow down, because I when I was a band director, man, that job, we'll talk about this again later too, because I saw your question about it. But it's hard, man, when you just like give everything you have to the kids. I gave everything to that job. I was working myself crazy, and I learned to kind of slow down in Brazil. I think that was necessary. And then after that, we moved to Suwon, which is a satellite city of Seoul, South Korea, which could not be more of a different
Totally
experience.
different. Yeah.
But it was equally eye-opening and incredible. I had never been to anywhere in Asia at all, period. And this was an interesting one, because we didn't go first. We didn't have a trip there first. We just moved there. Our flight landed late at night. We had arranged a job teaching ESL at a school, and the director picked us up and just brought us to where we were going to stay, and we just crashed. And then I remember waking up the next morning and being like, I have no idea what is outside of my front door. I don't know what this town is like. And it was so exciting. And I just absolutely fell in love with it. I mean, I had this is the period of time when I also got tuberculosis and pneumonia. So there was a negative part to this story, but that is not Korea's fault. Yeah. Korea itself was a phenomenal experience, and we were there for a year too. And yeah, I love that. I love traveling, but I love actually living other places more. I love moving around, because you really get to like kind of plant yourself and soak it in way more than you can just a week or two taking a trip somewhere. You know what I mean?
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
They were phenomenal.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. I'm fascinated by both of those. Just the bravery and kind of saying we're going to pick up and go is awesome. I love that.
Bravery and a little bit of stupidity.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you something. Ricky and I right now are talking about getting a fifth wheel in a truck. And he's looking at jobs in California. And since we don't know exactly where we'd want to live near where he's got an opportunity, we're like, well, we could maybe do that for a year. And then that way I could travel more and feel safe, like in in my own bubble. So
yes. Oh my
when
God,
you said that, I was like, that sounds very familiar to what my husband's like, hey, we should do this. And I'm like,
do you ever watch any of those van life videos on YouTube?
Yes.
Oh my God. Do you
well, he started, now I'm doing it, and that's a whole thing. And then I saw you go on the van trip, and I was like,
you're testing it out. Like, what's this like? What would it be like to do this full time?
We're doing the same thing. We're like, I mean, we need a little more than a van, because I was like, we're going to need space. I live stream too much for that. So, but yes, I'm fascinated by that.
Yes.
Okay, that's amazing. Well, I didn't know how kind of last minute, and the going to Korea thing, not having like sight unseen, is kind of amazing too. I mean, there has to be some fear in that, right? Like, did you guys have discussions about like what are we getting ourselves into?
Yeah, yes. But okay, Josh is such a planner. I mean, seriously, he thrives in organizing this kind of thing. And so I personally felt safe because he was worrying about all the
Yeah, yeah.
the details, but also I really just think, and this is a blanket statement, I don't mean to say this about all 20 somethings, but me as a 20 something, I was just a little too, maybe naive is the right word, that I just maybe didn't have the kind of fear that I would have now. But it also, I think it's also admirable. And I don't want to like get more afraid of doing this kind of thing just because
Right.
I'm getting older. It kind of makes me want to try something like that again. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, right now is not the time to move to another country,
True.
but
True.
you know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
think there's just kind of a freedom in just taking the leap and being like, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but hey, we'll
Agreed.
see.
And you've got each other, right? And that's
Yeah,
what he keeps saying to me. He's like, we have each other. And I'm like, well, that's
exactly.
true. We have not much else. There's not much space for anything else. So let me get us back on track a little bit. So talk to me. The other thing I know about you from stalking you is the foodie thing. So
Mm.
talk to me a little bit about like what dishes from either Brazil or your time in Korea that you picked up that you wouldn't have been introduced to if not for living in other countries.
Okay. Yes. So, as we all know, food is the most important part about travel. All that matters when you go on vacation is where you eat. That is all I care about personally.
Yep.
Salvador, like I said, we had taken a trip there first, so I knew I had a little taste of it there. Obviously, living there is different, mostly because you get to start cooking for yourself. But yeah, the great thing about Salvador was I mentioned I grew up in New Orleans, and
Hmm.
there is a striking similarity between the specific foods of these two cities. And I do think a huge part of it is because they are both port cities, and they were the port cities where an enormous majority of the slave trade came into those countries when that was
Sure.
happening, and that directly influenced. So, like in New Orleans, we have beans and rice. In Brazil, they have feijoada, which is like black beans and rice, but the process of cooking it with like the salted meats and the slow day long process, they're very similar. Brazil, there's a street food called a carajé, which is like there's this. It's a dough made out of black eyed peas, and it's deep fried in
I've tried
palm oil.
Yes, I've
Yeah.
tried this at the International Food Festival. Yes.
Oh, there you go. So
Yes.
it's deep fried in that red palm oil and stuffed with like
Yes.
dried shrimp and all of this pastes and flavor, so much flavor. Um, and then obviously the thing I think a lot of people know about Brazil is the churrascarias, which is where you get the meat on the sword and they come and you get like, I mean, meat.
Yeah.
So yeah, the food in Brazil. But what I learned living there, that was when I got my first experience of shopping at a real market. There was this gigantic open air market, a short bus ride from my apartment. And I mean, this is the country that has the Amazon. There were fruits and vegetables there I had never seen before in my life and have never seen since. I was able to buy a whole cacao and take it home and cut it open and pull out, the white pods, and then you get the
Yes.
cocoa beans inside of
That's
them. It was so
amazing.
cool.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. So the produce, I mean, the fruits and vegetables. So sorry, Rose is
Oh,
gonna
no,
go to
you're
town.
fine.
But yeah, that was incredible. And then Korea, um, I absolutely love Korean food. There's a great Korea town in Dallas. We have a lot of great Korean restaurants. So that's something we have frequently. But the first meal I had in Korea, we were teaching at a private English school, and the director brought Josh and I lunch, and they brought bibimbap. That was the first thing I had. I think everybody like bibimbap is fairly common now. Most people know it is.
Yeah.
It's a vegetarian rice bowl with egg and
Yeah.
spicy sauce. And that was just like my meal. I mean, I tried a bunch of stuff in Korea, but I probably ate bibimbap 2 to 3 times a week. It was so cheap. I could get it from a shop down the street for like the equivalent of $2.50. In winter, manduguk, which is this dumpling soup with like chicken or pork dumplings in it. Again, like $3. It was just so cheap.
Yeah.
The galbi places where they grill the meat at the table, obviously
Yeah.
those are phenomenal. Yeah, like, and kimchi. I always have a jar of kimchi in the fridge.
Same.
Kimchi every
Same.
day.
We that was the thing. My husband's family lives in Houston, and so some family lives in Houston. So we went
Oh,
to
okay.
visit them. We went down and went to a Korean restaurant that they loved. And
Mm-hmm.
when we came back, Ricky was like, "We have to find somewhere up here," and
Mm-hmm.
we have. And yeah, and it's definitely become a staple in our household.
Yes.
Okay, so we were talking a little bit about the band thing. So I know you were a band teacher. So talk to me, and I loved your vlog this week where you were kind of back where the convention was happening. So talk to me a little bit about, do you ever miss the teaching part or the connection to music?
Yes, I definitely miss it. Being at the convention, even though I didn't really go into the convention this time, it did make me miss it. Josh is currently like his job right now is a similar job to the ones we had when we left Texas back in 2007. So he's running a percussion program at a very competitive high school. And when I go to the competitions or the concerts to support him, I miss it. But when he's getting up at 5 in the morning to go to marching band rehearsal before school, I don't miss it. And then also the pandemic, man, the 2020-2021 school year was just such a nightmare for all teachers. The weird trying to balance virtual school with in-person school because you have kids doing both. Oh my God. And with band on top of that, like it's band. How?
I know. I was going to ask, how did they do Zoom? I mean, how do you even do that? I can't even imagine.
They did Zoom in the spring when lockdown first happened, like the rest of the spring 2020. They were completely virtual. And then in the fall, it was a mix. Kids could choose one or the other, and teachers could choose to either teach on campus. Well, no, they had to teach on campus, but they could either teach in person or they could get a private classroom and teach virtually, but they had to be on campus to do it, which was ridiculous, I think, whatever. And Josh taught on campus, and obviously they had to wear masks like 100% of the time. With teaching marching band, they cut holes in the masks so that the kids could play their horns, because actually I think there was some scientific evidence that it still helped a little bit to
protect.
And keep in mind, marching band is outside, so the kids are all outside and spread out. But yeah, he had to manage that. With the band was like, I don't remember now, but I feel like it was at least 2/3 its usual size, because at least 1/3 of the kids were at home, and it's like trying to make sure they still get a good music education, but it's marching band. So it's like, what do you, and then on top of that, people still were getting COVID and having to quarantine, or if kids were exposed, they'd have to quarantine. So it'd be like a couple of days before a contest, and all of a sudden one kid, test positive, and all the kids that had any class with him have to also quarantine. And so you're just like, oh, all of a sudden this whole section is gone. It was just like,
that sounds like a nightmare.
It was incredibly stressful. But things are much more back to normal at his school now, and they had a really good fall, and so things are better now. But yeah, I was not jealous of that. Oh God, I've never been so happy to have already been a work from home person.
I actually never thought about it. I was a choir kid, so we did all the trips with band. But when we would show up for our rehearsals, we were like walking up the hill inside in Missouri, mind you. You're in Texas, so like in the winter, it's real cold when they're out there. So that too, it's like, oh yeah, I wouldn't miss that either. The like 6 a.m.s when it's really cold outside. No, you keep that. Yeah, that's for you, my friend. Okay, so other than music, what would you say is a hidden talent besides cooking and music that might surprise those that follow you?
Oh no, I don't have any other talents.
Oh really? Those are the talents?
I really don't think I do. One thing that usually tends to surprise people is, I've talked about percussion before, and I'm a percussionist and I have a degree in music, but like my big passion was, and still is when it comes to music, was steel drums specifically. Like that was what I played. I was in I was in the steel band at my university, but I was also in a private steel band that we played weddings and special events and stuff like that in Dallas for 6 years before I moved. I played in some bands in Korea. I would play in like jazz combos and things like that. I actually, in 2000, so this was my second year of college, Josh and I went to Trinidad together, and we jumped into, this is a whole big other story, but there's a big competition there called Panorama. And there are steel bands in Trinidad. Literally each steel band is like 100 to 150 people. It's a massive band, and the sound it's like an orchestra, and the sound is incredible. And there's a competition, and we joined one of the bands. They're called Desperados, and they happened to win that year. So I have a world panorama champion title. Maybe that's a surprising.
That's pretty cool. I mean, that's really cool. You could be like, yeah, that was me. And steel drums is really cool.
Mm.
I wouldn't have known that. So that's interesting. Although I will say I did notice the drums. Like in your vlogs, I'd seen the
Yeah.
drums. So I figured, I was like, percussion.
That's like Josh's drum sets. We do have steel drums, but they're at school because his kids use them. Like he has a little band program at his school.
Oh, I love that. Okay, very, very cool. All right. So besides Rosa, who are your biggest supporters and fans?
Well, definitely Josh. He watches all my videos. He was the one who really was like, you need to start a YouTube channel. Because he
really?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think you have a question about this later that I'll bring it.
That's okay.
You know, you have people who watch YouTube as their primary source of entertainment, and then you have people who just use YouTube as a search engine to look up how to do something real quick. I was that person. He was the YouTube for entertainment person. So I just didn't get it. Yeah. I didn't get it. I didn't get that there were channels and it was like shows and you could follow people. I don't know. I never got into it. And he was like, you should do this. And so he definitely, and then just the way he talks about my career to people, I can always tell that he's just really proud. And then I would also definitely say my parents and my sister, every time a book comes out, they will order, I don't know how many copies, many, many copies. And then they live in Seattle, and they will drive around to schools and libraries and like donate copies. They go to bookstores and tell them to order my books if they don't have them. And they actually installed one of those free little libraries in front of their house. And they stocked it with my books because they have some kids on their street. So they have kids who will like come and read my books. It's really cool.
Yeah, I love everything about that. And I will be pointing my family to that and be like, just going to say, you know where the bar is set, friends, just so we're clear.
It's a high bar.
All right. Well, we're going to shift into career mode. And as I told you ahead of time, we're going to be covering lots of things. But specifically for these three, this is where I kind of honed in. Obviously, the work in progress is we'll talk about later. But my rereads for you were My Otter Half, which people should read. It's linked in the description box below. This I described as chicken soup for the soul. Made my whole heart happy. And then this one, which I had forgotten because I read this in 18? When did this come out? 18 or 17?
Yeah, I think 2018. Yeah.
Okay. It's like time is a blur.
18, yeah. What is that?
But anyway, I had forgotten how much I loved it, and we did the reread, and so I have all kinds of questions. So let's start with Spell and Spindle, and I'm going to read everybody the blurb and encourage everybody to buy it. And the other thing I'm going to say is don't forget to review. Reviews save authors' lives. So links are in the description box below if you need it, or you can search Spell and Spindle. So here we go. The Museum of Peculiar Arts holds many oddities. A mechanical cart, a diary bound in its own skin, and Penny, a child-size marionette who almost looks alive. Fog clouds Penny's memories from before the museum, but she catches glimpses here and there. A stage, deep red curtains, long fingered hands gripping her strings. One day, a boy named Chance touches Penny's strings and hears her voice in his head. Penny can listen and watch and think. But someone else is watching Penny and Chance, a man with a sharp face, a puppeteer who has the tools to change things. And suddenly, Chance is trapped in Penny's marionette body. While Penny is free to run and dance, she knows that finding a way to switch back is the right thing to do. But this body feels so wonderful, so full of life. How can Penny ever return to her puppet shell? Love it. So I love this idea. So right off the top, where did the idea come from? Because it is a body switch story.
Yes.
And it's an interesting one that has a story within a story. So where did it come from?
It actually came from, it was an idea I had while I was writing Olive and the Backstage Ghost, which you mentioned earlier. There are, in that story, Olive joins this kind of, this theater troupe. And one of the performers is a boy named Aiden, and he has a ventriloquist doll named Nadia, and they switch places. And this whole idea of a puppet and a person swapping souls it came to me from when I was a kid. I watched Alfred Hitchcock Presents because I was weird. And there is a story called, oh gosh, I think it's called an episode called The Glass Eye. And in it, a woman goes to see, a very kind of lonely woman goes to see a ventriloquist act. And it's this tall, handsome man and, a typical looking dummy. And the act is very funny. And she watches and begins to write letters to this man, and he writes back to her, and she falls in love with him through their letters, and she goes to his shows, but they never interact. And then they finally arrange to meet, and she goes into this room, and it's kind of dark, and she can see him sitting on the chair with the puppet, but then the man falls over and the puppet stands up, and it turns out the puppet was the ventriloquist the whole time, and she freaks out and runs away, which is such a sad ending.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things that stuck with me as a kid, and I think I carried that all the way through until I was working on Olive, and then I created those characters of Aiden and Nadia, and thought, oh, this is going to be the book I write after this, is this idea of this switching. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I knew that it was something there. And so, yeah, after I sold Olive and I had a 2-book contract and I could talk to my editor about the second book, that was what I pitched. And in fact, there is a character in Spell and Spindle, the radio show, the Storm that Chance is so obsessed with. In my mind, Spell and Spindle takes place a few decades after Olive, and the Storm is actually Aiden, the little boy from from the first thing. I never like put it in there explicitly. It was just like my own personal. I put little hints in that were just like Easter eggs.
Such a great Easter egg. Oh, I love that.
Okay. And because he talks about how he had a puppet once.
That's right.
And that was Nadia. And so yeah, I got really sucked into this idea of them swapping and what it would mean. And then when I started writing it, when it came time as part of my contract to write this book, that was spring of 2016. And election-y things were really fired up and getting hot. And I was in my feelings a lot about, gender roles and all kinds of stuff. And I don't know, that really, I think the dedication in that book says, to the pessimists who were right all along.
Yeah.
I was just venting, and a lot of that just came out in the story. And I know you had a question later about Constance, like,
yes,
that was directly that she took the wheel. I did not intend for her to even have a point of view chapters or anything like that. But
I can't imagine the story without her.
I know
that way. You know what I mean?
Yes. I just realized, like, here's this girl who on the surface has perfectly conformed. She is exactly what society expects a young girl to be.
Down to the outfit she wears on the adventure. I mean, it was like,
Right. But inside of her is this like seething red anger.
Yeah. Oh, rage. Loved it.
Like bursts out of her at the end, which was very satisfying to write.
Oh, gosh. Okay. That explains a lot, because that's very interesting. I wouldn't have ever put that context together. Okay. So within the story, and I'm not going to give anything away. I don't like spoilers. Everybody should get it and read it. You're going to love it. Don't forget to review it. But within the story, there is this story called The Cabinet Maker's Apprentice. And I wondered, is that based on like a real like fairy tale that I just missed somewhere? Or is it a story you made up for this story?
It's a story I made up for this story. And here's the funny thing. It did not happen until the second round of revisions. It wasn't in the first draft at all. It was just a book that Constance had and that Penny read and vehemently disagreed with. And they referenced it a lot. But it wasn't until the second round of revisions that my editor said, it would be a cool prologue if we could actually just see part of the story. Right. And I loved that. And I wrote it. And then I was like, ooh, it would also be cool if we could tell the real version of the story later at the climax, so we can see how it was twisted and kind of warped. And that happened in the second round of revisions. And a lot of it came from, a lot of this book was, I've always loved like Grimm's fairy tales, the really dark versions of Rumpelstiltskin. And, there's a lot of spinning wheels. Spinning wheels just play a big sinister role in a lot of these books. And I love retellings. I love fairy tale retellings, but I didn't want to do a retelling. I wanted to create my own dark fairy tale, and I wanted it to have those elements, which is why the spinning wheel is in there, and some of those other, even the marionettes, even the legends. It's like a little bit of a dark twist on Pinocchio, but it's not really a retelling of Pinocchio. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, so, I want to say I'll say, because again, no spoilers, but I love the way you used the spinning wheel in the end. You know what I mean?
Awesome.
I had
Yeah,
forgotten
yeah,
that, or I had forgotten that detail until I reread it, and then I was like,
yeah,
"Oh, that's right.
right.
That was the significance of that."
Yeah,
And then it was so brilliant because I kind of thought like, "Oh, I thought of that." Figure that out before I got to the last 10 pages. Yeah, okay. So I loved everything about that. So I had to go on and on. Okay, real quickly. So also the other thing, you kind of talked about the storm, and the storm, just for everybody, is this like comic book radio show character that in my head I pictured like I don't know, like a B-list actor who's like hanging
mhm,
on to this part, and it's like his whole everything, and he's kind of a swarmy guy. It's just
mhm.
awful. So what struck me about this, I was a comics nerd as a kid, and there was so much that you got right about fandom and like
Okay.
fandom and comics and stuff, you know? So
Mhm.
were you a comic book person, or like where did that side come from?
I loved comics as a kid. I don't know if the culture of comic book nerds would consider me one. I was never one who like who I can't rattle off details about issue number this of that. Like
Right.
I never hit that level. But this is gonna sound so cheesy, but like I remember just loving Archie as a kid, like Archie comics. I liked all the feel good stuff. I liked the adventure stuff too. Not I was just such a reader that anything, any kind of serialized anything, I was all over it, whether it
Hmm.
was books or comics. I mean, so yeah, for sure. And I also think a big part of it comes from, to me, Spell and Spindle is set in like an alternate New York City 1950s era.
Hmm.
And and I growing up, I had a deep love of 50s and 60s. I watched Nick at Night, like I said, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, but just all the shows, the music, obsessed with the Beatles, but also just obsessed with all music from the 50s and 60s. And just like, yeah, that kind of camp and radio shows. I was just enchanted as a kid of the idea that of like Little Orphan Annie and those shows that were so popular back then, and kids sitting in front of the radio and just listening to someone tell
Listening.
a story
Yeah.
and painting the picture in their minds. I loved that. So yeah, it was all of that, I think,
Yeah. I
informed.
love that because I was picturing the way you describe the neighborhood or
Mm,
the town they're moving to, but then the neighborhood specifically,
the suburbs.
um, definitely gave me that like 1950s, the
Edward
housing,
Scissorhands.
yeah, like boom vibe. That's what I was
Yeah.
seeing in my head. So you nailed it. Okay, well, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about the sort of the undercurrent. This gets to the question we can talk a
Okay.
little more about constants. But so in my otter half, which I love too, as I said, I talked about it as chicken soup for the soul. But in all of these books, all of your stories actually, and I have not read Cat's Meow yet, but have read Somebody to Love. Similar thing. There's
Oh,
always an issue that seems like a bigger issue than I think people would expect in a kid's story. So
yes.
there in my other half, there's an oil spill that's talked about,
Mhm,
and it's kind of drives the story. Constance and her feminism throughout Spell and
mhm.
Spindle, which you kind of talked about, but I want to ask you some specific questions about. And then Olive's determination to kind of keep her hope through grief and everything that's going on in Olive and the Backstage Ghost. So were
Yes.
these conscious decisions, or did they just fit the story?
Okay, so different answer for each of those books actually.
Good.
With Scholastic, all of my Scholastic books are IP. So my editor comes up with the ideas, and in the cases for these books, he always comes to me with a very specific social issue that he wants to explore in like the themes. Also a social media angle. Somebody to Love had Twitter. My other
Yeah.
half has YouTube, and the Dogs
Yeah.
Meow has Instagram. Just to make it a fun aspect of what the child POV is having. And each of the books is going to have 2 animal POVs and 1 kid POV. It's just like the format we're following for each and every one. So that was very, very deliberate. And I sometimes I get the stories confused. I'm sorry.
No, that's
um,
okay.
with my outer half, oh, the girl, the main character is suffering. She's dealing with anxiety because her family, her mom and
Lucy.
her, right,
Yeah.
Lucy, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know
I
my own
got
books.
you. I got you. Don't worry.
It's so embarrassing. It's just okay, y'all. These books were delayed so much. I wrote them so long ago.
I know. I know.
It's so weird to me that they're only just now out. But yes, so that's like something I talk about with my editor, and we discussed it up front before I write the outline. He's like, "Here's the kind of identity thing or issue thing that I want to explore. What are your thoughts for the plot?" And we'll toss around ideas, and then when we land on something, and I write the outline, and we go from there. So
Yeah.
that's how those work. With I'm going to do Olive first. Olive and the Backstage Ghost is the book that I think I've told the story a lot of times in some videos, but this is the one my agent kept trying to get me to rewrite, and I kept refusing. And she kept saying, this is 3 books in one. And I wouldn't listen. And that's why it took 7 years before it was published. And when I finally decided to revisit it, years after I had shelved it and I read it, I had more experience writing under my belt, and I had enough distance from that book that I saw what she was saying. And I read the book and I was like, strip away all the details of the plot. What is this really about? Okay, this is about a girl and her mother who are both grieving, and they're not doing it together, and it's driving them further apart. That's it. And that was like, as I approached rewriting it into the story it was supposed to be, that was like the sole focus at the heart of it. Because even though Olive is away from her mother for most of the book, she runs away to the theater, and that's where she spends most of the book. The antagonist, like Maud, is clearly really just another warped version of her mother. Like that dynamic informed the whole story, the whole thing. And with so with Spell and Spindle, Constance was just, when I created her, I had Chance as this super pessimistic boy. He just always thinks the worst thing is going to happen, and he doesn't consider that to be a negative thing. He just thinks it's smart to be prepared. And I thought it would be funny to contrast him with the super optimistic, perky older sister and parents, just because they wouldn't understand him, and he wouldn't understand them, and they love each other, but they're also like, oh, what's your deal?
Right. Well, it also lets him be unseen, right? How you kind of say in the book how they don't see, kind of look past him. So
they don't understand him, and Penny does, and that's like a huge thing for him. So Penny was just supposed to be a super happy, upbeat girl, and I thought she would be a cute companion for Penny when Penny goes on her adventure to find and rescue Chance.
Right.
But it was like, I mean, gosh, I think I was in the middle of I was writing the first draft, and it was whatever the first scene between Penny and Constance. I think, okay, so this is going to sound really confusing to people who haven't read the book. Penny and Chance, the boy and the girl marionette, they swap souls. So the boy is trapped in a puppet body, and he's kidnapped. And Penny is in Chance's body. She's in this boy's body. And she goes to breakfast that morning, and nobody knows. And Constance just looks at her and gives her this hard look, and she's like, who are you? She knows. And that just kind of came out, and I sat back and I looked at it, and I was like, okay, there's more to this girl. There's I wasn't expecting her to say that, but once I wrote it, it fit. It was like, oh, she sees her brother, she knows who her brother is, and she knows this is not her brother. That's interesting. And then the more I dug into her, the more so many of the scenes, now that I'm thinking back on it, weren't in the outline. Like when the two of them have an encounter with a man. What did I call him?
Oh, Mr. Thank you. No.
Mr. Thank you. Yeah, I think you're
Mr.
right.
Thank you, man, or something like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Who tries to get Constance to give him a hug and then guilt her when she won't. You know what I mean? Just this these microaggressions that she experiences and the way she handles them that just kept coming out. And I realized Constance is going to explode. I need to figure out where in the plot she explodes. You know what I mean? This is pent up and it needs to come out. So that was all spontaneous. It wasn't in the outline at all, and I just went with it. And I'm really glad I did.
Oh, me too. She gives the character or the story so much heart, and without her, you'd miss so much. I mean, her at first, I mean, how it ties up at the end, but the couple that they're on the train with, that whole interaction with them was like something it was cinematic. I could see it in my head, kids trying that, and the kid leading the charge being Constance, just all of it I could see. So well done. I'm going to throw up a few of these comments that you're getting because I didn't want us to go too far without seeing them. Doll Cecile Renault said, I'm so glad Michelle is saying this. This is about when you moved around. Just because we live in one place doesn't mean we have to stay there forever. Thank you. And then Jennifer Brown has a question, which we'll get to later. But Jenna O'Malley said, hello, all. So glad I managed to slip in after teaching. Oop, I may have accidentally started that one. Sorry, Jenna, my bad. Oh, this was the one. Here we go. Kelly Martin Book said, I didn't know they were IP books. Interesting. So just to recap, it was Some Bunny to Love, Cats Meow, let's see, Dogs Meow, and My Outer
My
Half. Right?
Yep, those are all IP.
And
Yep.
then will there be another one in that series, or you're not sure yet?
We're my editor has been in touch about it. We're gonna talk about it this spring.
Cool.
So
Cool. Exciting.
potentially, yes.
And then this one, which Kanashi said, you got so much going on, Michelle, all the ghostwriting and everything. It's understandable that you'd mix up
It's a
some of
big
the.
issue.
And so one of the questions I was going to ask that wasn't given to you, and it's more ballpark because I don't expect you to know it, but while I was sitting here thinking about it, I was like, okay, you ghostwrite books, you write your own books. Do you have any idea exactly how many books you've written? Like total? You know what I mean? Like just even a ballpark number. I'm just curious, like what it might be. Is it
Man, I'm really bad at. I don't think it. No, it's not 100. It would be.
Okay.
It might be close to 50.
I mean, that's something. That's not nothing. No.
I should count. This is something I should know.
Well, and I should have said it to you before, just springing it on you. But I was sitting here like last night when I was going over things, and I thought, I wonder how many books it was. So here's the question. So since those social issues, and you kind of told us how they came up, do you have any advice for an author that wants to, for instance, this is 100% selfish for me, but who's going to take on some social issues in a story, like I'm going to take on some bullying and some things with, a gay kid in my stories. So how do you think you do it in a way that's not heavy-handed? Because in none of these stories is the message, the social message that's kind of the undercurrent.
Moral of the story is.
Yeah, it's not like you're telling me what you want me to know. It's kind of just woven in there, and it's up to me to decide there's no like conclusive one way or the other. It's just sort of like, here it is. So what's your advice for someone to how to nail that?
My advice is to trust kids. Trust your readers. You don't have to spell it out. You know how it feels when you read a book or you watch a show and it gets preachy. It breaks through the story and you can feel the writer teaching you a lesson, and we don't like it, even if we agree with the lesson. You know what I mean? It just it's fiction. We want to escape into a world, and yes, we want to learn something from it, but we don't want to be preached at. And I think one of the biggest problems I see with people who are writing middle grade, especially for the first time, is that they think that because their readers are younger, they have to spell everything out. And you really, really don't. Kids are so good at reading between the lines, and they aren't going to like it if you just tell them what you're trying to teach them through like a character saying a line of dialogue. Bullying is wrong. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to do that. What you do is you create characters that they resonate with and that they can relate to and they recognize from their own lives and that feel real to them, and then they're rooting for them, and when something happens to that character they feel it, and then they take that lesson away from it. So just you don't have to spell it out. It's not a Aesop's fables spelling out the moral. You know what I mean? That's the hard part.
That's very nice. I like that. So we're going to switch gears. Your work in progress, which for those that don't know, I have linked to some of the vlogs for Michelle's in the description box below, but be sure and check out both the new series, which is all about freelancing. We're going to get to a question about that in a second. But also in the vlogs, the writing vlogs, you talk a lot about your work in progress, which is about another hot topic of our day, which is influencers. So why do you think this topic interests you? And on the back end of that question, as your own reach grows on YouTube, do you see yourself as an influencer?
God. Well, like definitely no, although I understand that depending on how you define influencer, anyone with an audience, regardless of the size, is an influencer in some way. The thing about the word influencer that has always bothered me is that when you hear somebody say they want to be an influencer, I don't judge that. I mean, there are a lot of people out there using their platforms for incredible good. Like just for example, I don't even follow this kind of lifestyle, but I follow a few people on YouTube who practice zero waste. Like they kind of live minimalist, so they try to reduce their environmental impact. And I learn a lot of great tips, and it's helped me to reduce my own impact. But just, when I think about an influencer like that, like they are trying to influence people to do something good for the planet. Amazing. But there are a lot of people out there that just want to be influencers to be influencers. They just want a big audience, to have a big audience and to make money. And it's like, what are you influencing? Like, what kind of influence do you want to have? What are you trying to convince people to do? Like, what,
Right.
if there's no, if you can't answer that question, then I'm side-eyeing you a little bit, you know? And that's something that I wasn't really expecting to get into in this novel. Um, but several of the side characters are different, very, very different types of influencers. And there's just so much that since I've joined YouTube and since I've started watching YouTube and following channels and just like getting into all these different communities, and to be honest, catching up on a lot of drama that's happened on YouTube that I missed over the last 6 years because I was never on YouTube.
Yeah, same.
It's just like, it's fascinating to me. It's fascinating, like the cycle of, oh, a big YouTuber, you know, does or says something terrible, and then they make what feels at this point like a stock crying apology video, and then they put it up, and then they disappear for a couple weeks, and then they come back, and everything's back to normal. And like, just there's from a sociology perspective, it's just so interesting and weird.
Yeah.
And another big thing I wanted to explore with this one character in particular is what the potential damage that can happen when you literally monetize your life, when there is absolutely no separation of your personal life, and including potentially your family, your children, everything, what you eat, what you wear, and your professional life. It's the same thing. And you can't, like, to try to change that is to kind of throw a bomb in your job and your personal life. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh,
I
totally.
think particularly with families, it's
Or
such
couples.
a
Couples
danger.
that do channels together. I tell Ricky sometimes, he's like, I could be in more of your vlogs. I'm like, we can't do that. I'm like, that is not a recipe for health and wellness.
And it's another level of when kids are involved. I have
Totally.
I have major questions about the ethics of some family channels on
Yeah.
youtube.com. You know, it's messed up. It is so messed up.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I guess it was just something that was on my mind, and it just came out in these characters, and it's been really fun to explore it, and honestly really fun to write some really terrible people.
Well, it's fun to watch you loving it so much, you know, and like you really are. Like as you talk about it, you're like, oh yeah, because there was one you were talking about before in the vlogs that you really didn't like, and now I think you've got to the point where you're like, I kind of understand her better.
I understand her, but she's horrible person.
But those are the people that make the stories great. You know what I mean? Like those are the people that are going to keep me turning pages. You know it will be, because I'll be like, what is she going to do?
I know.
So let me ask you this. So that's how you got to the influencer thing. So let's just do a what if. So you take the book, you're going to query it, and it's breakout successful. And now you've got an adult audience. So what is the expectation, or what would be your feeling career-wise? Do you stay focusing on that, or would you ever come back to the kitty lit side?
Oh, okay. Okay.
I worded it differently than I wrote it.
I love this. It's fun to play what if. Okay, so first of all, cue me hiding under my bed for a month, because I would have no idea how to handle a breakout thing. I mean, obviously I want it. Everybody wants it, but I also fear it in a very real way. You know, but that would be great. And I could see the next biggest struggle for me being trying to write a novel to follow that one. I think that is my biggest fear about having a breakout success, is like, you just set the bar for, you know, for yourself, and you're probably not going to reach it, because how many times do you hear people, I mean, people can't help but compare the next book to the super successful one that came before it, and it almost always never meets their expectations. It just wasn't the same. And so, you know, there would be a lot of like trying to process that and still find a way to enjoy writing the book.
Yeah.
And then as far as Kidlit goes, like my hiatus from middle grade is only temporary. Like there's no way I could never write middle grade again. I absolutely have to. And it's 100% non-negotiable for me that when I do start querying that, I find an agent who definitely has Kidlit experience as well. Yeah, for sure.
I was like, I'm going to lose you to that. what I think is fascinating, what that makes me think of is many, many moons ago, Michael Jackson did an interview for Rolling Stone. And in the interview, he talked about how he would spend the rest of his life trying to outdo Thriller. That was
Mhm.
his like goal in life, which of course could never happen. Like it was
Right.
Thriller, right? And what's funny about that is, although I will not mention her name, but she who shall not be mentioned mentioned that in an interview many years later when she was talking to Oprah Winfrey. And
Yeah.
Oprah said, "Will you ever write anything else in this children's story land?" And she referenced that same article and said, "I read that article and I knew that I could
Mhm.
never achieve this again." I think that's
Right.
really smart. So I think
Yeah.
for any of my friends that ever have that breakout success, my job as their friend is to remind them, like, hey, way to go.
Mhm.
This is amazing, but don't chase this. Like, just go do the
Yeah.
next thing that's amazing because
Right.
you're amazing and it'll all work out.
Yes.
Okay, so that's enough of me evangelizing that. So I wanted to ask this question on the Twitter, since I know you're not on. Good for you, proud of you.
Mhm.
There was a post by a traditionally published author this week that was pontificating on whether IP hurts an author in the traditional publishing world. So I know 5 traditionally published authors, yourself included, that have done lots of IP work. So it appears that there is a stigma there. Why do you think that is?
I was fascinated by this, and I'm gonna need to find this Twitter thread because I just want to see
I'll
exactly
find
what
it.
this person said.
I'll go dig it out.
It's it's nothing it's nothing I have ever even thought about or been aware of. So I don't think, to my knowledge, I haven't experienced any kind of negative, because of it. But I found myself thinking about there's so many different types of IP, and what could, pulling out of my own career and my own experience, like what other experiences might authors have had. And I was thinking, okay, maybe if someone like just like any author could get pigeonholed into a certain genre. Let's say you got into IP work for a specific property like Marvel, and you were
Mhm.
writing books for Marvel, and they were big, and that's kind of like what your name was attached to. And
Mhm.
then but your personal passion project was like a literary novel, and you wanted to sell it to an imprint that aims high, aims for the big awards, blah blah blah. Would there be like stigma on your name because you
Right.
write Marvel stuff and you can't, that means you, I mean, maybe you would have to be, I don't know. To me, even that is like, I don't think.
The vein was that just to give you an idea. So what the person was talking about was she had come into, as we all did at one point, to do YA books, and ended up doing some IP work for a TV show that did book attachments, and they were pretty successful. And so the discussion was just around that she was having a hard time getting any interest from editors on her young adult stories, and that the feeling that the agent had was that it was that they were wanting her to, just write adult stories that are close to where you're finding success here, because her name is on them, right? Like it's her name on the
Yes.
book. So that
Yeah.
was kind of the thing, is that she'd never been able to sell her other thing. They'd gotten her some IP work to kind of help her get along, which you've advised us to do. I will definitely do.
Yeah.
And so the theory is that these had kind of become successful, similar to kind of what you had said. She'd
That
sold a
makes
few of
sense.
them, and now it was becoming a thing that was like, oh, okay, is this all you can do, or write to this, not what you kind of want to write? And that's the reason I asked you, because I thought, who do I know that wants to straddle the like kid-lit adult world that might have also done IP and understand this?
I don't think. Okay, so the thing is, none of the IP stuff I've done that actually has my name on the cover has broken out in any kind of way where I think an editor or an imprint would want to like get me to write more of those, because they're just what you just described, they're just chasing money. And
Right.
that's what publishers do. That's understandable. I can see how that would happen for sure. And I don't think that's really any different than, like let's say you write a rom-com and it really takes off, like it's huge. If you want your next book to be a horror, your editor might be like, "No,
Yeah. Yeah.
we need to follow this up. Chase the money." Like they're just looking out for the money. I could see it. I could see that happening. But as far as just this person does a lot of IP work, I don't think there's a stigma there. My God, I really hope there isn't. I hope there isn't
Yeah.
like a blacklist out there with my name on it.
I know, exactly. I'd hope we'd know. Okay, well, that's kind of where that question was going. So we are going to shift gears. We are going to just sit back and relax. This is rapid fire time.
Oh
So
boy.
I'm going to ask you 15 questions, and the
Okay.
goal is just to Give me the first thing that pops to your head, and you're more than free to pass should you choose. So tell me when you're ready.
All right, go ahead. Let's do it.
Okay. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Flying.
What was the worst style choice you ever made?
Oh God, freshman, sophomore in high school, wearing those Daisy Duke shorts. Why?
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, I remember that. Does your current car have a name? And if so, what is it?
I don't have a name for my current car, but my second car was an SUV, a Saturn Vue, and I named it Ella.
Oh, okay, I love that. If you had to eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
No.
I know. Well, you're a foodie, so I thought this was a good one for you.
I can't pick one food.
You can pass. If it's too hard, you can be like, pass.
Okay, you know what? This is so boring and not foodie-like, but honestly, it would have to be scrambled eggs. I eat eggs every day and they make me feel really good. I just need the protein. So I would have to pick that, but I would be very sad at everything.
Fair. What season is your season? What season of the year?
Fall.
When are you most productive with your writing? What time of day?
Morning.
In one sentence. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yesterday morning I got up at 6 and I wrote 4,000 words by 9 o'clock. And then I was like, okay, I'm done.
Okay, go on, Michelle. That's, get that. That's amazing. In one sentence, if you could live in any country, where would you live and why?
That's so hard. Right now, off the top of my head, France. Maybe it's because I was talking about my parents with Paris earlier. I definitely have over-romanticized it in my head, but France for the food. But I would do the countryside. I would do the countryside. Okay. I would like to try that.
Country, French wine country, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were immortal, at what age would you choose to stop aging?
Oh God. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna say 42 because in a couple. Actually, wait. What day is today? Next week, I'm gonna turn 42, and I have been looking forward to my 42nd birthday because 42, as we all know, is the number that is the answer to life, the universe, and everything. So, like, I pause at 42 is everything. Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that, and congratulations! I'll be wishing you a happy birthday next week. In one sentence, who inspires you and why?
These are hard.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, hard in a good way. Who inspires me? Oh my gosh. Too many. Can I pass on this temporarily?
Oh yeah, totally. What advice would you give your younger self?
Oh geez.
I know, right? I hit you with the big guns last. The next few were fun.
Okay, good. My younger self,
again.
like my middle school self, like that young, like little
whatever age you think little Michelle needed to hear something.
Little Michelle, stop caring so much about what other people think. I know that's such kind of hollow advice because it's almost impossible to do, but oh my God, the time I wasted caring about everybody but myself. It's just sad.
Would you rather be the funniest or the smartest person in the room?
Honestly, the funniest.
You're going to sail around the world. What is the name of your boat?
No. I'm gonna say the Mr. Beaumont. I've been rewatching Friends, and I just watched that episode where Joey buys a boat.
Yeah.
Mr. Beaumont. So that's what I'm gonna pick.
Might as well. That makes perfect sense. What is the best compliment you've received?
The best compliment I've received. I think I vlogged about this last year, but I had a kid from a writing workshop that I had taught 2 summers ago email me 1 year later. She had, when she was taking the workshop for me, she had been struggling to finish a novel. She was a beautiful writer. Oh my God. The way she turned a phrase was like astonishing. Not just for a kid, just period at all.
Yeah.
But she couldn't finish a book and she had all these stories in her head and she was like, I couldn't get through it. I can't get through one. And I, really worked with her and gave her a bunch of advice. And she wrote me a year later and she had finished her book. And she was like, I really want to thank you for everything you did in your classic because it changed my life. And it was like, okay, well, that's it.
Wow,
Nothing's better than that. Nothing's better than that.
All right, so your last one, and then we'll move right along. In what 5 adjectives would you use for yourself? What what are 5 words you'd use to describe Michelle to someone that doesn't know you?
Okay, let's see. This is hard because it's like I'm not programmed to want to like say nice things about myself. But
around here.
I'm not gonna pick negative adjectives. So okay, I'm going to say determined, hardworking, loyal. That's 3.
Mm-hmm.
Kind, I hope.
Mm-hmm.
And encouraging.
Yes,
that's what I'm
yes. Yes, all of that. Those are all incredibly fair. Before I shift back to a few of my questions, I promised folks they could ask you some, and I started a few. So I'm going to put them up first. Okay, Jennifer Brown asked way back in the beginning, minus getting tuberculosis and pneumonia, would you still be traveling abroad if you could?
Ooh, that is such a good question. I could see the tuberculosis and pneumonia did kind of waylay us for a while financially. There were like a lot of hospital bills and recovery that had to happen. If that hadn't happened at all, I could easily have seen us like going over to Japan to teach for a year and like continuing doing it just for a few years. But also, even back then, I think we knew eventually we were going to end up in New York. It was always in the back of both of our heads. And even to this day, it's still the only place that actually really feels like home when I think about it. And I know I'll end up back there one day. So I think, yeah, there would have been more traveling, but ultimately I would have ended up in New York.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay. Our dear friend Colin Clark asks, I've been told that my 12-year-olds don't speak like modern 12-year-olds. That was deliberate on my part, as I don't want the story to seem dated in a couple of years. Should I modernize it?
I would say no, because I think there are a lot of middle grade, and I remember Colin's, I remember your samples when we did the workshop. You're going for that kind of classic timeless middle grade story, and those are popular, those are great. And I would think that if somebody gives you the feedback they don't sound like modern 12-year-olds, just say thank you. you're not that's not the kind of story you're aiming for. So no, definitely not.
Excellent advice. Thank you. Maggie, Penumbra M.M. Ward asks, question, do you worry about dating your works by using current social media platforms? But I don't think that's up to you in those stories, is it?
It's not up to me. And honestly, I have run into this before. I have a series called the Kat Sinclair Files, and she blogs. And it's not that blogs aren't a thing anymore, but if I were to write that book away today, she would be a YouTuber. Like I would, but then 10 years from now, it would be something different again. So I think it really can date your book. And when I'm doing ghostwriting, and like, for example, one of the books I'm working on right now, there is a social media app involved in the storyline, and the client and I discussed it, and my advice to her and what we ended up going with was just basically creating our own social media app and describing it in a way so that kids would find it familiar, like, oh, it's like this one, but it's its own thing. And then that way it doesn't date your book quite so much when that, when Snapchat disappears. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right, guys, I don't want to keep Michelle all night long. She's been working herself to death. So we're going to go ahead and ask some AuthorTube questions. So Michelle, I won't go through all of them. I'm just going to hit the highlights of them. So we kind of figured out that Josh kind of pushed you into the AuthorTube space. But let me ask you this. So what's been the best part about AuthorTube, and what's been the hardest part about, and I guess YouTube, not necessarily AuthorTube, but best thing and worst thing about joining?
Okay, so I mean, the best thing is you guys. The best thing is the community, the people, the comments, and feeling like I'm sharing my frustrations and everything that's going on, but everybody is sharing theirs with me. I feel like I know everyone who comments on my videos, and I know where they all are in their journeys and everything. And especially through the pandemic, man, it was such a saving grace. I started my channel in March of 2020, and I had no idea what was about to happen, but I am so glad.
I didn't realize that you started before.
It was, I think my first video was like March 6th. And I had been planning. I spent all of February like preparing. I was like scripting stuff and like getting ready for it. And then the pandemic happened, and I immediately had this thing to like throw all of my focus into while I was at home, this new passion, like keep me distracted from the news and stuff. Yeah, it was crazy timing.
Wow, okay, I didn't know. I didn't ever put that together. That's amazing. All right, so let's talk a little bit, because I really want to lean into the freelancing series. It's been really, really good, and I want to encourage folks to get over there and watch it, because again, you're a big advocate for all of us kind of finding our way to earn a living writing, if that's what we want to do. So why do you think that freelancing is a good option for those of us that want to write full time?
It is, okay, so it gives you, freelancing is something you can ease into if you want. You don't have to jump in whole hog if you have a full-time job right now. You can just start with small projects on the side. Like side hustle is a term that gets thrown around a lot. Take a small contract here and there while you still have the safety of your steady income, and build up a little bit of experience. And you can just do it very gradually, like shift to part-time at your job and like build up your freelancing, or you can just jump in when you want to. I think it's also, I mean, there's a lot of flexibility in there if you are trying to, become an author, especially if you're going the traditional publishing route where so much of it is out of our control. It not only gives you, I mean, obviously income, but it gives you projects on the side, but it helped you work on your writing. Because no matter what kind of writing I did, even in the very beginning when I was doing content farm stuff that wasn't really very satisfying to write, it was still practicing. It was still honing my writing skills. I mean, you get better with every sentence you write, you really do. You learn something from it. So yeah, I think, and it also, freelancing kind of forces you into learning how to manage your time and how to meet deadlines, which is something you got to have, like a skill you got to learn how to have as an author.
Great.
So, yeah.
So let me ask you this. You're watching you do freelancing on your vlogs is like, I sit there and think like, how does she do it? And then I sit there and think like, how does she not have an anxiety attack? Like, how does it happen? But here's the thing. It tells me that you love what you do, right? So I guess the question I have for you is this: what is the best thing about your ghostwriting, your book coaching, and also just facilitating writing workshops? What is the best thing that you get out of it, and what's the worst thing?
Okay, so the best thing is that even in times like right now, where I just have bitten off a little more than I can chew comfortably, when I wake up in the morning and I look at how much I have to do, and I have that moment of feeling very overwhelmed, I can stop and remind myself I get to spend the entire day telling stories, or helping people tell stories. I get to live in fiction. And that is honestly my dream job. I mean, if I had known when I was a kid that this is what I would end up doing, I'd be like, are you kidding me? Like, you can do this for a living? And so even when it's a lot, it's still such satisfying work, like the two projects I'm like neck deep in right now are both middle grade fantasies. You can only get so frustrated living in a middle grade fantasy world. You know what I mean? Like, it's so fun. It's so fun. So, I mean, yeah, there's that. And then there was a negative. The negative is that it is very, I mean, I've learned a lot about how much I can manage at one time. But when you're balancing multiple clients at once, there's only so much you can control. And so it's kind of inevitable that sometimes situations like this will happen where I just have a little bit too much work. In the case I'm in right now, and I think I've mentioned this a few times in my blog, but it's just that this book that a client and I, are working on, we thought it was going to be 55,000 words, and it turns out it's a 65,000 word book. And that extra 10,000 words was like an extra week of writing, and that's an extra week that I hadn't planned for. I mean, that's a lot. So it really just like caused me to squeeze other things together, and that it just happens sometimes, you can't get it right every time. And, contrary to that, some months you just don't have as much work as you'd like. And so you have to be really careful with your money. You can have a month where you bring in more money than you've ever seen in 1 month of work in your life. And you're like, oh my God, I'm loaded. But then the next month you're like,
Dry.
You really, and especially if you're the kind of person who is in a salaried job and you're used to the same amount dropping in your account every week, it's a shock. it's a shock, and you have to adjust to that for sure.
Oh yeah, I would imagine. So my last AuthorTube question I want to hit you with is, what on your channel do you want to try that you haven't already? Or what's the thing that you might see that you haven't done?
Okay, so I love this question because I have really enjoyed kind of evolving with this. I didn't start trying to vlog until I think about 6 months into having my channel, and that was so fun, and now that's like the bulk of what I do.
I
And
love
because when I started, I was scripting everything out, and it was
Mhm.
like workshops or just me like talking head. Here's a list of this, or here's how you write better descriptions, blah blah blah. And I think there's a lot of value to that kind of content, and I do think it helped me to grow my channel because it's the kind of stuff that is highly searchable. How
Mhm.
to do, what is a red herring,
Right.
like those videos like that definitely helped me to grow. But now that they're there, I started to find, as I was watching more AuthorTube videos, that the content I was most drawn to and found more interesting was just people sharing their journeys. And it didn't matter if they had more experience than me as an author, or the same experience or less experience. There's just value in watching somebody else work through their struggle and see what they learn, and you can almost always learn something from that. And that's the kind of thing I've been trying to like lean into a little bit more personally. But I would actually really like to hear suggestions, like what kind of, because I like
Okay.
experimenting. I would definitely, especially once my current work crisis is over, I would like to like start putting a little bit more effort back into my channel. And I like experimenting with different videos. I got really inspired last summer by there's a YouTuber, a really huge YouTuber, Matt Diavella, is that his name? He's the minimalist guy. He was like you know who I'm
Oh,
talking about?
yes. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
He made a documentary about minimalism, and
Yes.
I think how he broke out on YouTube. And he has a very specific style to his videos that I really liked, and I experimented with that last summer. I did a video, and I think it's called God, what would this is how you start writing a book. And
Okay.
I copied his exact style, where it's like a mix of talking head, but then kind of little skit moments where I'm working, or I'm talking to the camera, or you know what I mean, like that. And I thought that was really fun. I don't know if I'll do it again, but I mean, I'm definitely open to suggestions if there's like stuff they want to
Yeah.
see,
No, yes, I see the AuthorTube questions, JC. But yes, and I'm going to get to them now. We're going to switch to them. But folks, do me a favor and drop your suggestions for Michelle's channel in the description box with an S, and then I will know that's what it is, and I
Awesome.
will star it so I can put it up here. So I'm going to ask the AuthorTube questions and then shift over to our last section. So JC Carpenter asks, question, is there anything you would do differently in regards to your AuthorTube journey if you could go back and start again?
That is such a good question.
Great
Um,
question.
yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think, because to be honest, my kind of instinctive answer is no. I'm really happy with how I've handled my channel, because it seems like the mistake, and I'm not talking about AuthorTube, I'm just talking about YouTube in general. The mistake most people make is that they expect success within like 10 videos, and then they give up. And they also define success in terms of the number of views, and like everybody wants that one video to go viral, and then they think that you're just going to get an explosion of subscribers, and it's going to be like perfect from there on out. And that's really very rarely how it actually works. And so I kind of, even though I mean, I'm not gonna lie, early on, I was like, "Ooh, maybe this video will take off," and none of them ever did, but they all steadily got a little more views over time. And the way I was defining success for my YouTube channel was just community. Are people coming back? Are they commenting over and over again? And that's been true. The same people come back, and every week it's like a few more people join, and it gets
Mhm.
a little bit bigger. And it's just been a very slow, steady growth. And I am still able to easily keep up with comments. Sometimes you see YouTubers who are so big that they put a video up, and within minutes there's hundreds of comments. And it's like, that's kind of sad, because it's physically impossible for them to keep up.
There's no way. Yeah.
I would be sad if I couldn't. I like
Me
reading the
too.
comments and responding to everybody. You know what I mean? So,
Oh, yeah.
so honestly, I mean, there might be little things I would change here or there, but overall, JC, I don't think I would do much different. I really like how it's going.
No, I love that. I should plug, we have 2 other interviews in the audience. I'm just going to plug them really quickly because community thing. But JC Carpenter is starting a new interview series that is straight out of her magazine. So same title. So she'll be doing one soon. And Books by Adrian is in the chat. He also runs a great chat show. So JC Carpenter says, question, is there anything you would do? Oh, wait, same question. Sorry, JC. The right one. Any author tuber you would like to do a collaboration with?
Oh, man.
Or who's your dream one? That's a great question. Like, who's your dream? Like, who would be the, like, it doesn't even have to be AuthorTube. Like, who is the, who is your, I'll ask an AuthorTuber, but then YouTube too.
Okay, so I actually did reach out to someone once. They never responded, which, it happens. But here's what I would really love to do for a collaboration. I really love the teacher community on YouTube. Their teachers just like vlog their days, and I miss teaching, so I like hearing about classroom teachers just sharing their experiences. And there was one in particular. She has a pretty big channel. She has like 50,000 subscribers, and she teaches 5th grade. And I reached out to her because I was like, how cool would it be if we did a collaboration where I did a virtual school visit with your kids and we each vlogged our side of that experience? I think that would be so cool. And she never responded. And I know she's probably super busy, but yeah, I would love to do that.
We should try again because that's an amazing idea.
Yeah.
Are there any author tubers that you haven't worked with that you'd like to?
Gosh, that's a hard.
I know there are so many. Like it's I mean I
would happily. I'm very let's see. How do I say this?
Like careful to sign up for.
Everybody that's here, I would be happy to work with. Every AuthorTube channel that I'm subscribed to, I would be happy to work with. I know there are a few AuthorTube channels out there, maybe even some bigger ones, that I would be fine not working with. there's just, you know what I mean? I don't know. Yeah. I don't mean to be throwing shade, but like,
I gotcha. Yeah. We gotcha. No shade. We are going to dance away from that question. No, I'm kidding. We have some good ones here. What is the easiest and hardest part about ghostwriting?
Oh, okay. Oh, good question. The easiest part about ghostwriting is that it's a mind meld. You have somebody else feeding you ideas about your story. It's like, it's better than a sounding board. Anytime I'm stuck on a ghostwriting thing, I can contact the client and be like, I'm stuck on this. What do you think about blah? And then because this is their baby, their project, their characters, their world, they will just throw ideas at me until something sparks and gets me going again. So that's the easiest and most fun part. The hardest part is the pressure of having these clients who are so invested and passionate about their book. And every time I send them the draft, I'm just like
it.
Please like it. Yeah.
Well, let me ask a follow-up to this that's been on my mind. I'm very curious about it because you came and worked, you were so generous to come and work with us on voice. The thing I kept wondering is like, how does it not sound like Michelle Schusterman's book? Does that make sense? Man. You know what I mean by that? I'm not asking that, right?
I do. No, you're asking it right. And this is so cool because this is the second time this question has come up. I just did a podcast interview and they asked me a very similar question. And I hadn't thought about it before. But the answer I came up with it kind of made me realize this about myself. A big insecurity I have always had as an author from the beginning is that, you know how there are just authors out there who you read one page and you know it's them. It's like that author has a voice, a very distinct voice. I don't think I have that. My books sound very different from each other. And that has always made me worry that there is no Michelle Schusterman voice. But I think a lot of authors are like this. I think some authors have a distinct voice and others are chameleons. And we just get these different ideas and a voice develops in that book. And that is a strength of its own. And I think it's one that comes in handy as a ghostwriter, because when I have a client come to me, one of the questions I always ask them is, name as many books as you can that you would like your book to be compared to. And then if I haven't read any of those books or authors, I go and look them up and I read the pages until I start to form in my head, oh, this is the tone they're going for. This is what they're going for. And then I work towards finding a similar kind of voice, And I think that's made me happy that I don't have distinct, unique voice, because then every client's book would sound like a Michelle Schusterman book, but that's not what they wanted.
Well, that's good. Because like I said, I sat there and I went, but I mean, I totally get what you're saying. And I do think I know what you mean about the authors who right away. But now that I think about it, those probably are more few and far between than I
think they are.
would imagine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The stories are what, when you pick up a series, for example, that is what feels familiar. I don't necessarily know that it's, although I was going to say Lee Bardugo, but I actually say that was one that I could probably tell. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, I get what you mean. So great question from do you have a story you've written that you really love?
Like, I have a sauce. Okay, I do still love all of the books I've written, but yeah, Spell and Spindle is the one I'm most proud of. Yeah. It was like it was the time period. It was 2016 when I wrote it, and just how it helped me vent, but also it's one of those rare occasions where like I really started it with a very specific vision. And when I wrote the last scene and finished it, it was like, wow, this is exactly what I wanted. That rarely happens for me. So yeah, I think that has to be my favorite.
I love that. I'm throwing up a few comments. Kelly Martin says, community is a great way to describe success, especially on AuthorTube. And I could not agree more. And Richard Holiday, I had it, Richard, but I lost it. But it said we'd all be starstruck. And they were talking about anybody trying to collaborate with you. And so I was just going to reassure them, I did that to Michelle when she emailed me the first time. I did the whole, like, I'm going to make a fool of myself. Don't worry about it. And then I kept making a fool of myself. But that's okay. We won't talk about it. Funny how community is not a measured metric for YouTube. Humans are, not machines. So then the rest of these are questions. Oh, wait, let's see. This is about, yes, thank you. And yes, feeding off of energy is true in real time. That is true. And looking forward to this. Colin asks, does Michelle realize the number of likes so far is 42? The answer to life, the universe, and everything.
Yes.
Love that. So that's a good vibe. Regina asks, will you want a beta reader for your adult novel? She said, trying not to sound too obvious.
Oh, that is so sweet of you. So I have critique partners, and they are definitely, I'm very lucky. I think I've talked about this before, in that my 3 steady, tried and true critique partners are a former literary agent and 2, a copy editor and a former Penguin managing editor. They're very good at what they do. But it would be really interesting to put a call out for beta readers, like to use YouTube in that way. I honestly don't know. I have not gone that far down the
rabbit hole. Yeah.
Like thinking about this draft, because right now I feel so desperate to get back to that book, because I haven't had time to work on it because I'm working on all this ghostwriting stuff. Yeah. But I'll keep that in mind, Regina, because I do think that having other sets of eyes, it's always good to have more sets of eyes, so.
Sure.
Yes. I mean, general answer, I will absolutely be getting beta readers. Everybody should have beta readers. Yes.
Yes. So in general, the answer is yes, always get beta readers.
Always.
In general. I'm throwing up a few more of these questions that we're getting because they're great ones. Question, do you find writing in the voice of the author you are ghostwriting for? Does their voice bleed into your work or vice versa?
I have never had an experience where of the voice for a book I was ghostwriting bleeds into my work. They're such separate things in my head. Like, I think I've said this before, but the reason when I get asked, like, how would you feel if a book you ghostwrote like really took off, or like, does it make you feel weird? And it truly doesn't, because even though I wrote it, it was never my idea. They're not my characters. It's not my world. It's the client's world. It's the client's characters. You know what I mean? Like, yes. I don't carry them in my heart that way. I care about them. I don't want to make it seem that way, but it's just not the same thing. If somebody hired me as a ghostwriter and I came up with everything, I created the book, and then they put their name on it and sold it, I mean, I would never do that. But then, I would be having some bad feelings about that. But like, so yeah, the voice, it stays here. It's ghostwriting here. Yeah.
This question fascinates me. Have you ever ghostwritten a book for a celebrity with a non-disclosure agreement included and everything? I'm not asking who it is, just curious. So have you ever written, maybe the better question is, have you ever written a memoir?
No, I don't do memoirs. Oh my gosh, that's a totally separate thing. I did do some writing for a celebrity once where I had to sign a non-disclosure and it was fiction.
That's cool. And technically, the books, and technically they're celebrities, but you have a book series with Olympians, right?
Oh yeah, Alex and Maya Shibutani.
That's celebrities, I think. So
they were super great, and like my name is on the title page, and so I didn't have to keep that a secret. That was really nice. I would have been sad if I couldn't tell people about that.
Oh yeah, those are cool. Yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. Jenna asks, have stories or YouTube content made you miss former students or not? So why? I think when we were talking about watching the teachers, I think.
Oh God, yeah. Oh my gosh, I miss my students. I had so much fun as a band director. I can't even. It hurts my heart, and I actually keep up with some of those kids. Like a couple of them found me on Instagram when I joined a couple of years ago, and they'll send me messages sometimes. But yeah, it definitely makes me miss students. A lot of the last year, though, really, it's just been watching these teachers go through the pandemic. Like my heart goes out to them so hard, and also just selfishly, I've just been so relieved that this didn't happen when I was a teacher, because the stress of it, my God, it's just.
It's one of those there before the grace go I. Okay, 3 more from Maggie. How do you prepare for a ghostwrite? Do you read everything that they've written or have published before, or do you just take notes on the world and jump in?
Yeah, the first thing I tell them to do once we've like decided to work together is to send me literally everything they have, any material. And I tell them, don't be shy. I don't care how poorly written it is. Like if you've tried to write a chapter, it doesn't matter. It's just the more information you can give me, the better. And I take that and read it and make notes for myself. And then if they want to do like a call, we'll have a call. If they rather communicate through message, I'll type up a letter and just give them like, it's almost like an editorial letter where I provide like an overview of here's how I see the story going. What do you think? And we go back and forth on that. And then when I feel like I have what I need to write the outline, then I start outlining and we go from there.
Okay. There you go, Maggie. Maggie's last question. How do you feel about ghostwriters or fanfic writer who try to hijack another author's world? So is this sort of in the kidney vein? Like, is that what we're talking about kind of thing? Right? The kidney? Wasn't it the kidney lady? The kidney letter lady?
Well, when she said fan fiction, I was like, wait, are you talking about like how 50 Shades of Grey is Twilight?
Oh, maybe that's
that was where my mind went. And honestly, I find that a very interesting topic, because the thing with 50 Shades and Twilight, I never read either, so I don't really know how, like if you read Twilight and you didn't know and you just picked up 50 Shades, could you tell it was Twilight fan fiction? Because we're all inspired by some of the stories we read. We all take certain things and then turn them into our own things. I mean, there's nothing, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I don't know how close it is or it was. And I've heard certain things about other YA authors that I won't mention whose big best-selling series were once fan fiction of other big best-selling series. And I don't, I think it's just, the kidney story is a good example too. How close is it? In the case of
the thing about the kidney story is though the letter, right? For me on the kidney story, it's the letter. It's that you used the letter. Like that's where you went awry. I mean, definitely there was other places, but
named the character after the woman. Like, I'm sorry, no, that was not being inspired by something and then writing fiction because you were inspired. That was venting your feelings by, I don't know. It was almost like revenge fiction. And I don't think that's right. I had oh man, that kidney thing. That was crazy.
Yeah, that was a lot. Okay, so we've got a few more questions we're going to get through, and then I'm going to wrap it up and we're going to go on to Word. We didn't get through any of the craft stuff, so Michelle, there will be a time in the future where you'll be hawking something, come back on the show, and we're going to do this all over again.
Okay.
Because I just can't get enough. Kanashi asks, what published author, if any, would you love to co-author with? This is one I'd love to know too, just out of curiosity. Is there anybody like you'd dream to co-write a book with? Because you've co-written with several people.
I have co-authored. Okay, so I mean, yes, there's so many. I love co-authoring. A lot of it would depend just on the vibe I got from them as like, how are you to work with? You know what I mean? So it's really hard for me to say, but just in terms of like their books, what I mean, I don't know. The first person that came to my mind, because I guess I'm still thinking adult mystery mode, is, oh gosh, I don't even want to say this. It's embarrassing, but Leanne Moriarty. I love her book so much.
Yeah.
I love like all of them. They're like just the right level of, I mean, they're pretty dark, but they're funny as hell in a way that the shows based on her books have never quite captured.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's just such a goal for me. I don't have a clue if I would, but yeah, I mean, obviously I would love to work with her. I could make a list. I could make a list of people I would love to collaborate with. Oh my gosh, co-authoring is just so fun.
That could be video content.
It could.
That could be a video.
You could, in the universe.
You could do it. Oh no, I just lost a question. It was a good one. Let me see if I can grab it. It was right here. Is there a genre that you would not ghostwrite in on principle besides memoir?
Ooh, yeah, no nonfiction. Nonfiction is a different beast, different skill set. I am not qualified. Definitely not. Also, not picture books. Picture books are hard. I could no more write a picture book than I could write a good poem that is worthy of being published. It's just not my specialty. And I get a lot of requests from people about picture books, and they think writing a picture book is going to be easy because the word count is short. And I'm like, you don't understand how this world works. So definitely not picture books. Also, I'm not the best person for erotica or like really gory horror. That's not me. Psychological horror, yeah. But like gore, no, definitely wouldn't.
Your last question comes from our friend JC, who asks, have you ever been interested in writing a television series?
Oh, hell yeah. Actually,
or a film, maybe. So screenwriting.
I've done some screenwriting. This is a story. This is a.
Oh wait, I remember the story from the Q&A. You told me a little bit of this, so I know a little bit of this already.
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
The very short version of it is that when I lived in New York, I answered a Craigslist ad where people were looking for writers for a television series, and it was a little sus the way that the ad. It was just a Craigslist ad, but I was like, yeah, whatever. This could be interesting. So I went and met with this. It was the owners of this really little startup production company who had a TV series. They had a pilot episode and a series Bible written for a sitcom that had been picked up by HBO. And they showed me proof of this and took me on as a staff writer. And I worked with the head writer, and I got to write the third episode of the show. So this guy had written the pilot and the second episode, and I wrote the third episode, which was fun as hell. And we had auditions. We saw actors. I got to be a part of that. We did a table read, which was super fun. It all felt like it was happening, and I was very excited. But the whole time, the vibe I got from the people at the production company did not know what they were doing. And I was side-eyeing it the whole time. And ultimately, I mean, it's just such a long story. It dragged on for months, but it all just kind of fell apart, and they quite literally ghosted me. Like the last meeting I was supposed to have with the woman who ran the production company, she was like, let's meet at this Starbucks. We had been meeting there regularly. She was like, let's meet there, tomorrow night at 5:00. And I was like, okay, I'll see you there and we'll talk about what's next. And then I went to that Starbucks and sat there for an hour, and she never showed up, never responded to text. And then that was like the end of my TV adventure. But I mean, I got to write a script. I got to watch actors audition, which, God, I could never be an actor. Oh my God, what they have to go through. Like, and I got to sit in on a table read and hear this table of super talented people read what I had written, which was just like the coolest thing ever.
That's so cool.
So yeah, I would totally do it again. Just hopefully with like, not a shady company like that. It was weird.
Yeah. All right. One last question before I ask you your word of the year. So Maggie asks, and I think it's a good one. Would you take over a series for an author who passed away? If an editor came to you and said, would you finish this?
Oh man, that's a big ask, that's like so much pressure.
Because then like you have to meet that, and like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know. don't know. You
And the hard thing is because my instinct is to say, well, if it was a series I was passionate about and I really loved, I would consider it, but also that would make it so much scarier. I would definitely consider it. I'm not going to say no. But if it was something that I didn't know and there was like a fandom I wasn't a part of that was waiting for me to deliver, I don't think I could do that.
Yeah, no, I'd be terrified. I'm imagining like, you finishing or the last book in a series, even that kind of, and of course Sanderson was who I was thinking of, but yes. So yes. Okay, so my last question, I'm gonna let you go because I can see Rosa dancing. She's like, it's walk time, Mom. So I'm asking everybody on the new show, which you're my last one of this series, so you're my end of this before I switch over to the new one on Monday. And that one I'm going to ask everybody at the end, what's their word for 2022? So if you had to pick a word that you're going to live by all year long, what is your word and why?
Okay, so my word is patience. Patience in both my professional and personal life, because I've been pretty open about talking about how I feel like my career, not the ghostwriting part, but my novel part, how I've been floundering, how I'm going to be looking for a new literary agent. And I think we didn't get to this question, but you had asked me what was the piece of advice I would offer to someone who was about to start querying, and it would be patience. And I have set for years and years now, I keep trying to set certain personal goals for myself. And, I'll make a little progress and then crap happens and I fall behind, and you know what I mean? And there are a lot of areas in my life right now where I feel like I'm very slowly, very steadily, finally starting to make progress towards these things that I've wanted for a long time. But I just need to stay patient. I mean, getting published, getting a traditional publishing deal does not happen overnight. And it's hard. You know how it is when you see people get book deals and you don't even have a book to query yet. And you're like feeling this weird jealousy. And you're like, bitch, you haven't even written a book yet.
I know.
We have to remember the industry is always going to be there. It's not going anywhere.
Yep.
Your future readers aren't going anywhere. They will be waiting for you when your book is ready. We all like just patience and taking it day by day on everything. I'm not just talking about writing, just all of these personal things as well. Just slow progress every single day. So yeah, that's a good word.
I think that's a good word to live by. I'm throwing up a few. Richard Holiday is effervescent, which I'm assuming, Richard, because it's almost 1:30 a.m. in London. That might be why that's yours. Shannon's is forward. So I like that one. That's a good word. Kanashi says progress or productivity. I would say one of those for myself. That's a good one. Colin says it's to build. And then I'm getting the imp is real. So if anyone else has a word, drop it in chat. We are going to wind down our chat for the evening. We had a whole section we didn't get to. I'm so sorry, but that just tells me I have a good reason to bring you back and to have you back on at some point. Here we go. This is the one I was waiting for. Perseverance. Yes. I love that word too. And this one, let's see what you got. And
I like that.
For me, I like that. You know what? That means you're open to more things. So
that makes me think of improv. The rule in improv, yes, and isn't that a big rule in improvisation to keep the story going?
Keep it going. Keep it going. Yes, Dad, I'm going to bed in a minute. Good, Richard. I'm so glad. Michelle, this has been lovely. I am so excited when I started bugging you and was like, hey, we're gonna do this. I'm gonna come after you to see if you'll come on and play with us and let us ask you all kinds of questions, because so many people think the world of you. I'm so glad you came on, gave us so much of your time. My door is always open to you. There are, never a lack of people who want to show up and hear what you have to say. And I've got a whole new list of middle grade people, by the way, 6 more new ones who have found me since our middle grade writers club. Yes, who are after me about, can we get together again? So at some point I will try to track you down and we'll find another way to do a collab with folks.
Absolutely.
So, all right, everyone, stay healthy and well. I appreciate all of you for being here. And Michelle, thank you so much. Bye, everybody. Wait, I didn't let you outro. So unprofessional. Do you want to outro?
It's fine. Guys, I'm Michelle Schusterman. You've heard all about me by now. I'm so bad at outros.
I am too.
I think I recognize pretty much every single person in the chat from my videos already, but if you aren't following me, please head over. I would love to hear about your projects and what you're working on. And thank you so much for being here today. And thank you so much, Barrett, for having me, because this has been so much fun.
Thank you for coming. I think the world of you. Bye, everybody. Stay healthy and well, and we will see you soon. Bye, everybody.